So I have a sad confession to make. During all of April, or rather PleinAirpril, my outdoor sketching was incredibly minimal. One rare sunny day I did climb up Songsan Ilchulbong, or Sunrise Peak, to test out a tiny watercolor palette I'd assembled and to paint the crater at the top. The sun was getting low in the sky and shadows moved quickly. And I'll be the first to admit that this isn't my best sketch. But I just enjoyed having a moment sitting outside, taking in the view and seeing what my paints here can do. A mix of the core portrait set, a few gouache paints from both Holbein and Mission, a Korean brand that I'm testing, and the Daniel Smith Lunar Black and Burnt Sienna. I still have an empty spot on this palette, and after this test I think I'll add a deep blue, maybe ultramarine, to complete it. Now that I've had footage to prove that I actually left the house in April, let's turn back time a bit to the Jeju Book Fair at the end of March. The two-day event that I'd prepared for with lots of scenes and postcards. Like the year before, when I attended for the first time, this was the perfect weekend to see where my Jeju-themed art has evolved to, but also to catch up with other artists, meet publishers and writers from all around Korea and abroad, and go book shopping. I admit I was a bit sleep deprived by day 2 and so focused on packaging and, well, selling that I barely filmed anything. I'm incredibly happy that a lot of my Dracula art scenes sold as well. Usually those aren't as popular here in Korea. I think this art vlog might be a nice opportunity to talk about some of what I actually do for work. The combination of book illustrations, commissions, attending events with my own art prints and scenes, the social media and YouTube side, and my efforts to actually improve as an artist in between. Let me know if you have any specific questions as well, and I'd be happy to chat more about my daily life as an illustrator in a future video. This art vlog also shows very clearly some of my limitations and failures, and I say that without wanting to be harsh. It's just part of life. I didn't sketch much, I couldn't really participate in PleinAirpril, often found myself relaxing after a long day of painting by reading a chapter or two of a book instead of sketching, to be honest. I also didn't film as much of my process, as I'm not yet confident enough in my painting skills. I found myself needing to really focus on the painting and paint mixing, and often forgot to properly angle my camera, check batteries and recording times. So I still have a lot to learn and some laziness to overcome as well. And I've also accepted that it's fine to not always do everything, everywhere, all at once, but to just let things go and focus on the most important, so I don't get overwhelmed. One small part of what I do is the Patreon membership mail that I send out each month. After returning from the book fair, I dove into packaging those. The March prints were themed around cherry blossoms, which was a bit ironic with how little I ended up seeing of real-life cherry blossom season. They were just about to bloom that book fair weekend, but then it stormed and rained for a few days, and by the time the blossoms returned, I couldn't take time off to go and see them. I usually plan all my projects a few months in advance, which includes time for personal paintings that then turn into YouTube videos, Patreon prints, or just new portfolio pieces, some art scenes, or even just practice and studies. The wonderful side of making these personal projects part of my schedule is that if an urgent client thing comes up, I can just scratch or delay the personal ideas and adjust my schedule without any issue. It gives me a lot of flexibility and freedom while still having room to experiment and work on my own ideas whenever I have time. One client project that you've probably seen pop up in previous videos, Thanks for Nothing. The successful Kickstarter meant that I got to paint 3 more interior illustrations for the book. Stephanie, the author, is amazing to work with as I have so much freedom to come up with ideas based on the book excerpts and scenes she sends me. Here, for an illustration I've titled Gothic Nights, I really leaned into all my favorite tropes and visuals from Gothic horror movies. I like to combine more relaxed indie publishing where I don't have to rush deadlines and that harmoniously fit in with everything else I do, and then leave some room for the usually more intense deadlines that come with larger publishers. If you're self-employed, you don't want your schedule to be so packed that you have to decline exciting projects due to time restraints, but you, of course, also don't want to be underemployed. Like I said, I also always have personal projects to pursue, which keeps me from falling into the dreaded post-painting slump. In the grand scope of things, I'm still new to this. I'm still figuring things out and also try to learn more about the technical side of art at the same time as working in this field. The color palette is very soft and muted, but with some, I hope, interesting variations, like the crimson candlelight and blue-purple glow to everything. The interior illustrations are all really small, but I'm also trying to make them full illustrations with multiple characters and more or less elaborate backgrounds. So a lot of it is up to the brushwork. I try to balance detailed rendering on the faces with more vague paint blobs everywhere else. Even at this small size, that gives the impression of details despite not being a fully rendered and blended illustration. I think Gothic Nights is the Thanks for Nothing illustration that this approach worked best for. And I've just learned a lot from painting this series overall, which I'm really happy about. There's a lot of cobalt blue in this painting, which is wonderful for mixing these very soft neutrals with raw umber and some burnt umber as well. Compared to ultramarine blue, cobalt blue darkens, paint mixes way less, so I kept this illustration very mid-tone focused and low contrast. That way the black cat, Mirabelle, stands out much more. She's the star of this illustration after all. Like I mentioned, Stephanie Holmes is amazing to work with, and she even gave me the go-ahead to use one of the interior illustrations as a limited Patreon release. So, Gothic Nights is the Patreon print for the Blue Dragon Airmail tier in April. Mirabelle the cat also gets a separate little bonus sticker which will be included in everyone's letters as well. The actual snail mail reward is this hydrangea cat illustration I'd painted last year and had wanted to turn into a postcard ever since. I painted lots of flowers and cats for last year's Jeju Book Fair, so now that my cat guide booklet is sold out, I thought it was time to finally give my favorite illustration of the bunch a separate postcard print. A while back, I'd also painted this small hydrangea flower with Korean traditional paints, so that made for the perfect detailing on the back of it. I can't wait for hydrangea season and really hope it will be kinder to me than the cherry blossom season was. With so much time this spring spent on commission work, I really did neglect my sketchbooks quite a bit. I did bring my sketchbook to a museum visit about a month ago and really enjoyed taking these kind of visual notes to remember the artists that we saw better. They are just quick doodles with a single black colored pencil. I'm sure you've gone to a museum and taken pictures of what you see, maybe of the name plaques of the artists, only then for those to kind of get lost in your hard drive, but I really enjoy this approach of taking tiny sketch notes of my favorite pieces and writing down the artist names. It feels more personal and easy to remember. After I finish an illustration, I usually let it dry for a couple weeks, since I use some slow-drying acrylics and retarder fluid just to be safe. They are usually touch dry and ready to scan within a day though, which is very important if you have a deadline to keep. Before applying varnish, I apply a thin isolation coat to unify the acrylic surface. Because of the different acrylic mediums I use for mixing, from matte to gloss, a mix of both, as well as just water, this isolation coat turns everything more uniform and also acts as a barrier under the varnish layer. Here I'm also varnishing a small portrait commission I'd painted earlier in April. It's funny how this is both the smallest format I've worked on in months and one of the larger faces I've painted in acrylics in quite a while. Because my book illustrations often show full body or half body characters, even if I paint on a much larger format, overall the faces end up tiny. Looking at some of my footage from this portrait painting process, I also find it kind of interesting how hesitant I still am when I work on commissions compared to just my own experiments or test paintings. A while ago, as part of an art haul, I'd posted a quick portrait painting that I did of an orc character, and I used a much larger bristle brush and kind of just went in without much planning or thinking or even a proper sketch underneath. And I think that's something I still can only do in my personal work where the stakes are low and it's okay if I mess up. So, as I missed my sketchbook practice, and while I sketched this new interior illustration showing a lot of statues, I did feel the urge to practice human anatomy again. So 2 weeks ago I found this figure drawing book at the local library. Rather than a guidebook on human anatomy, it gives advice on how to draw it, and I feel like that's a bit of a subtle difference, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. So it won't tell you which muscle is which, but it will guide your eye to proportions, to easy guidelines. And I found it really interesting because I haven't drawn a single study based on this book. I've really just been flipping through it, and it's been on a book stand, kind of one of those easels you can put your books on, next to me while I was drawing completely different poses. But just having the sketches next to me to look at strangely helped with capturing the anatomy of the poses I was trying to draw. And that then kind of led down a rabbit hole, and I bought 2 human anatomy books. So, like I just said, the other book, Inche Sketchnote, is focused on how to draw the human figure. These two, of course, are similar, but they focus more on the anatomy behind it. They will have, as I can show later, some advice on how to draw and capture and shade the human form, but it's really all from this basis of understanding the anatomy you're seeing. And they come from kind of two different angles, one based more on photography and then overlaying muscles, and this one more of a breakdown of muscles that you would find kind of in a medical textbook nearly. And I did actually go to art school for scientific visualization, and we did have medical like anatomy drawing, and that's not the same as then being good at drawing people, at doing character art or anything like that. It's a completely different skill set, but still it in the end all kind of grows together. And I'm someone who really enjoys the technical, the analytical underneath the art. So a book like this, where I can actually kind of remind myself of what the individual muscles are called and how they are all connected, and proportions and bones and joints, helps me a lot personally. Your kind of process and the way you perceive anatomy might be completely different. I like having something that is like an encyclopedia of the human body as a book at home to actually look things up. And over the last year or so, whenever possible, I have started to collect more books as references, just because I found that collecting references online has become more and more fraught, kind of, with the whole AI thing that I'm really desperate to avoid. And while I have reference sets of photos from, for example, Howard Lyon, and highly recommend those, I do want to combine those with my own knowledge at every point of the way. So what am I going to do with these? Am I going to do a front to back study session, or flip back and forth and draw random things? Who knows? After April is over, maybe mid-May, I kind of want to retreat back into the study phase, learn something new and try to practice, and then take that newly learned information or those practiced skills and paint again. Possibly soon, but for now this also has just been standing on that book stand, that book easel next to my desk, and I can kind of stare at the muscle diagrams while sketching some figures. So I'm using reference photos like I mentioned, but then look at these illustrations here and the diagrams in here to adapt them, to really understand what I'm seeing, which muscle in the arm is doing what, and how I can use that in my own art and to inform my shading and colors. Anatomy for Artists is a book I've been looking at for quite a while, because it's by a publisher that I've also liked other books by. I have their Color and Light tutorial book. I hesitate to call it a tutorial book, it's more like an encyclopedia or lexicon in itself. And here too we have this entire breakdown. And what I really enjoy here are these drawings overlaid on photography, because I do this kind of semi-realistic fantasy art style. Even if I have a diagram, in the end it has to look like a kind of fully rendered, painted human, right? Not a diagram. So this combination of photography, model, 3D model, and diagram drawing helps a lot with understanding of what I'm seeing in nature, what is underneath, and then how I can adapt that to my art. I'm desperately trying to find footage here that I can show on YouTube, because I know that even artistic nudity is a big issue, so hands seemed like a safe space. So there are all these different hand poses here, for example. It also includes the head, the neck, every part of the body. Again, can't show much here. The illustrations in here feel much safer. It's him, the Asaro head, my best friend. I really like this kind of head model, the very angular, exaggerated planes of the head. It helps me so much in understanding portrait lighting, and I'm delighted that it's a part of this book as well, so that I don't always have to go for online options. I don't really have a plan, I don't have a curriculum or something. I'll just, if I have an illustration that features a flexed arm, I will study a flexed arm in here and then see where that gets me. And this one I'll have to return to the library real soon. I'd be curious if you have any anatomy books that you enjoy, that you found helpful, if you have any study plans of your own. When I was looking for books online, honestly, the art style was quite important to me. This one is a pretty neutral style, nearly has a bit of a medical influence. It's not too stylized, but kind of like the shading of it. I'll have to look up the artist, actually. Oh really, he is a scientific illustrator, Roberto Osti. So that explains maybe why I was drawn to the art so much. So I think this is probably the more universal and a bit more beginner-friendly of the two books, because it also gives very concrete drawing advice at the same time. Again, full review incoming after I've actually sketched and drawn a bit more with this. While the books are open in the background for now while I paint, I hope that I can do a more dedicated sketchbook session someday soon based on them. Let me know if you would find a particular side of anatomy interesting, maybe proportions, muscles, or even specific body parts like shoulders or arms. So that was my April and some of late March. I'm a bit disappointed in how little sketching I got done, especially with all the excitement I'd felt for PleinAirpril, but I'm also happy with all the illustration work on my easel and look forward to more in the future. I hope you sketched along with me, or actually that you maybe took a break from whatever you're working on to rest and recharge. It's May now, so Mermaid would be another one of these monthly art themes that I really enjoy. Do you usually try to participate in themed art like this? Maybe because it inspires you or can give you some creative direction? I hope I can sketch a little something, maybe combined with anatomy studies, but also want to make sure I don't force anything. In the meantime, I'll be painting statues, sharing more of this process over on Patreon, and I hope to see you again in my next art video.